preaching Mother's Day sermons. They are some of the easiest messages I've ever had opportunity to share. And there are people I will run into occasionally from churches in my past, and they will tell me, I remember your Mother's Day sermon, and they'll share something with that. And I think it's because there's just something about exalting our moms that resonates in our hearts. Because we all know we need to do it, but we don't do it enough, do we? And so I think when we get an opportunity to focus our attention on at Mother's Day on the great work that moms do, I think it sticks with us. And so this year I'm taking the approach that both mom and dad are true superheroes. Moms especially have superpowers, and I've spoken about this before. And you all know these things are true. Moms have a lot of superpowers. They all have eyes in the back of their heads, right? You know that because your mom can see whatever it is you're doing when you think they're not even watching. They know. They see things. They got those eyes right there. And moms also have super hearing. They're able to hear their child a block away playing at the park cry out in pain, and they can discern their child between 100 children playing. And then they also have supersonic speed because they can be at that park in 4.2 seconds. Moms also have the ability, I know when I was a kid, I had that doll. You fellas might remember Stretch Armstrong. Remember Stretch Armstrong? Yeah, mom is just like Stretch Armstrong. She can reach behind her, break up a fight in the backseat of a car while all the time still driving straight ahead. And they have that powerful voice that you can hear when she says, "Don't make me come down there." It just puts the fear of God in you. That's the superpowers of mom. But mom, we know what a struggle it is to be super mom. We see you like this. Dun, da, 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 dun, dun, da, da, da. But in reality, you feel like this. Ugh. If I could just go to the bathroom for a minute and have a break. Don't tell them I'm in here. You're even afraid to flush because you know they're coming as soon as they hear that you're in there. Kids can be exasperating. And I'm including your husband when I say kids can be exasperating. And I think it's borderline criminal that you only get recognized 2 days a year, maybe 3 if you're lucky. Mother's Day, your birthday, and Christmas. And if your birthday happens to fall on Mother's Day, you don't even get that. If they just throw it all on the same day. And so, Mom, I know sometimes it feels like you've been forgotten. And so today I want to remind you of 2 things. First, we love you even if we don't always show you that we do. You ever see the guys on college football that, they'll make some great play and the camera will zoom in on them? And what do they say to the camera?
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom. Dad, you're useless. Hi, Mom. The second thing you need to know is I want you to know that you are never forgotten. And I want to get into our message today by highlighting an unusual hero in the Old Testament. And we're going to take a look at Esther. And Esther is a unique book in the Old Testament because God is never mentioned anywhere in the book. He is, however, implied throughout the book because you see God's divine providence for the nation of Israel on every page. And that story of Esther has been told down through the centuries because it is a story of Israel's deliverance and God's blessing of His chosen people. And so for that reason, it is actually part of the holy canon of Scripture. And Esther's story is also unique because her story is a story of hard luck that turned into blessing. You see, Esther was orphaned at a young age. We don't know how old she was when she was orphaned, but both of her parents died, and she was actually taken in by her cousin Mordecai. They took her in and raised her. And being a Jewish woman, and part of the Jews were in exile at the time, she didn't probably have the best upbringing. Life was not good, and even though I'm sure Mordecai probably did his best to raise her and take care of her, she was not his child. But in spite of all of that, Esther grew up to be a very beautiful woman. Another unique aspect of Esther's story is that God uses a woman to be the hero of his chosen people. Typically, you always see, people like Joseph, Moses, Abraham. And there's a few female heroes in the Old Testament, but not very many. But Esther certainly is one of those. And so let me give you the context for the story I'm going to share with you this morning. We're going to literally go through the entire book of Esther in one sermon. But I'm going to condense it. You're going to get the Reader's Digest version. The Jews, as I said, are in exile, and they're being held captive in Persia. There's a king at the time over Persia named Xerxes. And what we're going to start out, or where we're going to start out, is actually taking place in the 3rd year of his reign. And during the 3rd year of his reign, he had conquered a lot of territories. He had amassed a great amount of wealth. And so he throws this huge party. And Sherry, you weren't around for him to invite you, so. But he throws this huge party. And it wasn't just any party. This party lasted 6 months. Now that's a party. And he invited all the dignitaries from everywhere to be his guests for this extended feast. But during this 6 months of the feast, Xerxes had put a drink restriction on. I think it was like a 1 drink minimum, 2 drink maximum kind of party. Up until the last 7 days. In the last 7 days of this 6-month party, he takes all the drinking restrictions off and says you can drink however much you want. And so, man, they're just whining and dining. They are pounding the wine. And Xerxes has a little bit too much to drink. And so he decides, and he wants to show off his trophy wife, Queen Vashti. And so with all of the fellows looking on and kind of wanting to see what this queen looks like, she was a very beautiful queen, he summons her to be brought to the palace. Now, she's off having her own little party with the women during this time. So the king sends this message and summons her to come so he can show her off, but the queen refuses to come. She's got her own shindig going on. She's not leaving the party. So word comes back to the king that she refuses, and he gets furious. And so he asks all the other men that are there, what do you think I should do? Well, guys, they were like, man, you can't let her get away with this. And of course, they've been drinking too. So we're full of courage when we, a few drinks, You can't let her get away with this because, and get this excuse, because if our wives hear about it, they'll act just like her. Well, the queen did it. So they said, you need to teach her a lesson so that our wives will still respect us. Wow. The challenge has been thrown down. So King Xerxes takes her advice, and he banishes Queen Vashti from the palace completely. She's no longer allowed to come in. And so a search begins to find somebody else to take her place. And so the search goes out throughout the entire kingdom, and they go out and they get all the pretty young women to find a new queen for the king. And in their searching, they find a woman that's living with Mordecai named Hadassah. Hadassah was also called Esther. And Esther was knocked out gorgeous. So she's taken to the palace, and she's added to this large harem of women that had been selected. Now ladies, you're going to love this part. Hang with me here. Esther quickly became a favorite of the king's eunuch, and so he gave her the special spa treatment. Every day, she got beauty treatments and special food. She had 7 female attendants that helped her look pretty every day. Wouldn't that be nice, ladies? Just to have 7 ladies who just hung out and made you look, did the makeup and the hair and special spa treatments every single day. And you spent most of your day just getting ready for your day. Wow. And so Esther got all of these beauty treatments. She got to stay in the best accommodations in the palace. And she got these beauty treatments for 12 months. All in preparation for her to see the king the first time. So as part of this harem of concubines, she would be summoned to go to the palace. She got to hang out in the palace and do a lot of different things and kind of learn about all of that. But they could only go see the king if the king summoned them by name. And Esther had been warned by her cousin Mordecai not to reveal her nationality. So she's amongst all of these women, and they don't know her from any of the Persian women. She kept silent about all of that. And so here's the setting. King banishes Queen Vashti from the palace in the 3rd year of his reign, and then sets out to find another queen. Esther is taken into the harem of candidates, and she's pampered and beautified every single day. And then in the 7th year of the king's reign, 4 years later, she finally gets taken to the king. She's had 4 years of pampering. All this time she's used to be pretty and to be polished and to learn about the ways of the palace. She's learned how to act among royalty. And finally, she gets this opportunity to go before the king. And she wins the favor of the king. And the king makes her his new queen. Now, another background moment that's critically important is that shortly after Esther becomes queen, her cousin Mordecai learns about a plan to assassinate the king. Little backstory that's going on here. And he tells Esther this story, and Esther goes and tells the king, but gives Mordecai all the credit. So she was in the perfect place at the perfect time to have this story told to her and to pass it on to the king. Well, they check out the story. They find out that it's true, and that these 2 men were conspiring to assassinate the king. And so they impale them on poles and lift them about 75 feet in the air. Kill them. Now, that's at the end of chapter 2. Now, you could theoretically go to chapter 2 of Esther after the last verse and just write the end. And it would be a great story. You could make a movie of that, and they probably have. And it would seem like a great story. But the story isn't over. What you need to know about this story is that even when you feel like your life story is over, it isn't. Because God never forgets. In Esther chapter 4, we read of a conspiracy that takes place that causes the king, he sort of tricked into it in a way, to order the extermination of all of the Jews. And when Mordecai hears of this, he tears his clothing and he sits at the king's gate in sackcloth and ashes and in mourning. And when Esther hears of it, she searches out why he is so mournful. And this is where Esther learns of this plot to exterminate all the Jewish people. Mordecai urges her to speak to the king. But you see, the way this thing worked back in this time is that you just couldn't go in to the king. And she's afraid to go in and tell the king what's going on without being summoned first. So this is when Esther has the opportunity to finally be the hero. Pretty little Esther. Little Orphaned Esther. That's another good movie title. Little Orphaned Esther. The one person that no one probably thought would do anything great in her life was about to step out from behind herself and demonstrate true heroism. And so Mordecai sends her these words of encouragement in chapter 4. Do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. This is her big chance. This is the opportunity to put on the big red cape and be the superhero for such a time as this. Mom, you might be going through a struggle right now at home. Kids are driving you crazy. There's other kinds of drama. Maybe you're one of those special blessed moms that's a single mom and you have to be a big superhero. You got to do both mom and dad's job. And so you've got the really big red cape. And maybe God put you through all of the stuff that He's put you through for such a time as this. Maybe God has allowed you to go through all of the circumstances and all of the hardships and all of the upbringing and all of the training and filled you with graces and filled you with blessings for such a time as this. It is now the time to put on the big red cape and be the superhero God has prepared you to be. All the preparation, all the favor that Esther had gained, all the experiences of knowing the ins and outs and the power players that were in the palace were all for this specific moment in time. And so with heroic confidence, Esther sends a message back to Mordecai. She says, go gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me. Neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise, and so I will go to the king, which is against the law. You see, if she went in without being summoned, she could be killed. She says, and so I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. If I die, I die. But in 3 days, I'm going to go before the king. And so the day comes when she's supposed to go before the king, and she dolls herself up. Again, she still has these 7 ladies helping her get ready every day. So she gets all dolled up, she puts on her best dress, she gets her hair done just right. She's got the perfume, she's got the makeup, she's got everything looking fantastic. She's got everything in place, she's working it. Some of you are saying, did my pastor just say work? Yes, he did. And she goes to the palace, and she doesn't immediately go into the throne room, she stands outside. You can picture this big giant hall with people all around, and she's just outside the doorway. And I can almost envision it as she steps, there's a certain light, and she steps into the light. Just enough for King Xerxes to catch a glimpse of the most beautiful woman in the entire kingdom. Now what guy's going to say no to that? And so he points his scepter toward her, which means you can come in now. And she comes in and she touches the scepter, which is the right way to greet the king, show him honor. So she comes in, she's got all this wisdom inside of her, and she walks in front of the king, and the king says, honey, you can have whatever you want. Now that's my paraphrase. It says, whatever you want, up to half my kingdom, you got it, girl. And so what she asked for, she says, all I want you to do is I want you to come to a banquet that I've prepared for you, and I want you to bring somebody with you. And she says, when you get there, then I'll let you know what it is I want. This other major leader that she wanted to come was a guy named Haman. Haman had risen up through the ranks and was appointed as one of the highest officials in all of the kingdom. He more or less was the king's right-hand man. And Haman was Mordecai's enemy. Haman hated Mordecai because Mordecai was a Jew. When Haman would walk by, most people would bow down and honor him, but Mordecai would not. And Haman hated that. And it was for that reason that Haman came up with the plot to have all the Jews exterminated. It was because he didn't like Mordecai. But before that plot could be hatched, he had to go to this banquet that Queen Esther was putting on. Well, that night, as the king is lying in bed trying to sleep, it's the night before the banquet, the king cannot sleep. He is stirred. He is troubled in his heart, and he cannot sleep. And I don't know what it was that kept him from sleeping, but in order to feel good about himself and to fall asleep, he calls for the books of the Chronicles to be brought in, and he wants them to read to him about all the good things that's happened since he's been king. He basically called him in and said, hey, I'm really having a hard time sleeping. Could you just come in and tell me all the good stuff I've done? make me feel good about me so I can go to sleep. And it says it was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. So this is that plot I mentioned to you earlier in the first part of the story. And the king says, what honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing. Nothing has been done for him, his attendants answered. And the king said, who is in the court? I don't know if he heard somebody, but he said, who is it in the court? And now Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about impaling Mordecai on the pole that he had set up for him. His attendants answered, Haman is standing in the court. Bring him in, the king ordered. When Haman entered, the king asked him, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Now, this is great. I love this part of the story. Haman is so full of himself. Now, Haman thought to himself, who is there that the king would rather honor than me? So he answered the king, for the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn and a horse the king is ridden on with a royal crest placed on its head. Then let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the king, for the man the king delights to honor. Because he thought he was going to get the honor himself. Go at once, the king commanded Haman. Get the robe and horse and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew. Boy, can you imagine how his heart sunk? Who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended. So Haman got the robe and the horse. He rode Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. He was so upset that Mordecai wouldn't bow down to him, and then he had to lead him through the street going like, yeah, this is the guy. Right? Here's the lesson. God never forgets what you do for him. In the fullness of time, when you least expect it, God reaches down and blesses you with honor or some significant opportunity. And sometimes the recognition or the reward or the satisfaction comes much later than you expected it. Mordecai was waiting in sackcloth and ashes to be basically exterminated. Instead, he gets a robe and a horse and a parade. Mordecai would have never been blessed until after Esther became queen and had full access to the king. So you see, Romans 8:28 really is true. God really is working all things out for good to them who love God, who are called according to his purpose. Sometimes, when you're a mom, you feel forgotten. You feel as though you're taken for granted. Sometimes when you're a mom, you feel like all the hard work you put in is a giant waste of time. But wait. God has not forgotten you. He knows and remembers everything you have done. He remembers the nights that you stayed up to make cookies for tomorrow's bake sale that your child just told you about this afternoon. He remembers all the motherly advice that you gave your children that seemed to go in one ear and out the other. The mom advice we were talking about last night. He remembers the way you kept order in the home. He remembers the sacrifice that you made so that your children would have the best opportunities. He knows how you put your life on hold so that your kids could have something better. God remembers. And God honored Mordecai and he honored Esther for their faithfulness. And God never forgets his people. Ultimately, Haman's plan was exposed at the banquet and the king ordered his death. Esther, Mordecai, and all of the Jews were saved. And so for all of you moms out there that feel forgotten or insignificant, I want you to know that God doesn't believe that you've ever been insignificant. You have been part of his purpose and plan for your family and for his kingdom. Perhaps God has been preparing you for such a time as this. You are on the verge and just about to rise to the opportunity that God has placed before you. And that purpose God has for your life is nothing short of heroic. You see, raising children is a hero's task. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not for the meek and the timid. It takes real heroes. So if you are an exasperated, exhausted mom with little ones at home, I know you often feel like you will never be able to accomplish the seemingly impossible task of turning those kids into responsible adults. You look at them and go, it'll never happen. But you were prepared for such a time as this. You were prepared for this moment of heroism. And one day, you're going to see that child walk across the stage as a graduating young man or young woman, and you will know that all of the hard work paid off. One day, you will see them be that responsible adult that you've always prayed for, and you will know that God remembered those prayers, and he remembered you. For you moms that feel your children are grown, they've flown the coop and they don't need you anymore, God knows that there is a greater purpose for you too. And it may not be this week or next week, but there will come a time when those busy adult children need their mama's wise counsel. And your phone will ring, or you'll get a knock at the door, and they will turn to the only superhero they know in real life. When that happens, I want you to go to the closet. I want you to dust off that red cape. I want you to put it back on and come to their rescue. Mom, you really are our heroes. And we applaud your courage this morning.